Pakistan's lingering flood crisis, and the businessman who went to help because he thought the victims deserved better.
I think they are clearly desperate, and what really breaks my heart is when you see really old people who can't even walk are clamouring through. Food really ends up going to the fittest.
This is the ITV News at 10 with Alistair Stewart and Mary Nightingale.
ITV News followed businessman James Caan to Pakistan. Determined that he could make a difference on his own, he was soon overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the disaster.
Good evening. In a disaster affecting millions, it's difficult to get any sense of the scale of the devastation caused by the floods in Pakistan. Tonight, we have one man's story that helps to illustrate the monumental problems. Businessman James Caan, of Dragon's Den fame, was frustrated by what he thought was the slow response to the crisis in the country where he was born. He has money, influence and contacts, so he decided to do something about it himself. But having been there and tried, even he has to admit there are no easy answers to a tragedy on this scale. Our correspondent Juliette Bremner went with him on his journey of discovery to Pakistan.
Haunted by the images being repeated day after day, frustrated by the delays in getting food to those who so desperately needed it, one of Britain's most successful businessmen believed there had to be a better way. James Caan, self-made millionaire and TV star, set off on a very personal mission to the land of his birth. He headed to the back streets of Lahore with his cousin. He needed to find enough food to feed 1,000 families.
I just want to make sure that they're dry, and also because we're going to give them out into the camps, I need to make sure the food will work.
He was surprised to discover that supplies were running short because the Pakistani government had been buying in bulk, stripping the warehouses.
The problem I'm facing is because everybody's now starting to wake up and realise a lot of the shops just don't have, all the stuff's virtually gone. And what I'm really concerned about is the prices have shot up. So what I was expecting to pay, actually, it's almost doubled.
The food he eventually assembled cost James a total of £15,000, and that was to fill just one truck.
It's now 3 weeks since the floods swept through Pakistan, and still people aren't getting the food and the help that they need. So increasingly, private individuals like James Caan are stepping in to fill the gap left by an inadequate government response.
As we packed the bags, it emerged that James had elaborate ideas about what he thought the flood victims would need.
What I don't want them to do is lose their dignity. I want them to be able to live as though they would normally live. And why shouldn't they eat the same as what you and I would eat? And that, to me, I think is very important.
But he's totally unprepared for the reality on the ground. In a village on the outskirts of Nowshera, families have returned to the rubble.
So that means the water was literally, must have been, That's
The floods tore through here on August the 2nd. Their destructive force will be felt for years to come.
I mean, I must admit, I had absolutely no idea. When you imagine coming to somewhere where water has affected a village, you don't expect to see this kind of carnage. I suppose because if it's an earthquake, I can understand, but my perception of water isn't where you get such sheer devastation, where buildings that are 15 foot high can literally just be completely destroyed.
In the command centre for this national disaster, James heard firsthand about some of the distribution problems.
This is the Babusar Pass, and then it descends into Chelas.
General Ahmed is leading the army's response.
I think people need to know that is it working, and if it's not working, why it's not working.
You're not happy with the government, don't give it to the government. Give it to anyone with whom you are happy. You want to come do it yourself, do it yourself. You want to channel it through NGOs, do it through NGOs. You want to channelize it through international UN system, channelize. Pick up any channel of supply that you want to do it.
After a 6-hour drive, the truck has arrived in Nowshera in northwest Pakistan.
Very, very important moment for me.
It was the start of a very steep learning curve for the British entrepreneur as he splits his food between 2 charities. First stop, in the middle of a road. This is the haphazard way to hand out food. There's an urgent need to get their hands on any of the free bags.
Back home in Britain, James Caan thought it couldn't be that difficult to deliver the aid to the people who needed it. Now that he's here in Pakistan, he's realising it's a much more complex and chaotic business than he ever imagined.
There is supposed to be a system, but it soon disintegrates. They say the world forgot them in the early days of this disaster.
I think the scenes here are what you would describe only as desperation. People who haven't seen food for days, haven't seen aid come in. I think they are clearly desperate. And what really breaks my heart is when you see really old people who can't even walk are clamouring through. Food really ends up going to the fittest.
In contrast, at an official refugee camp run by charities, each family is called by name. It may seem bureaucratic, but they're determined to ensure that the food parcels are fairly distributed.
I've now realised that actually I'm only ever going to give to organisations that have a proper infrastructure, that have quality management on site, because when you're dealing with something of this magnitude, it's not just about getting food there, it's about the logistics, it's about the transportation, it's about the size of the families, but also, you know, what specific food. Me sitting in Mayfair and deciding what I should be sending is very different to what the situation on the ground is.
Providing for the flood-stricken people of Pakistan is a monumental undertaking with no easy answers. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, Pakistan.
And James Caan has arrived back in Britain just a couple of hours ago, in fact, and he joins us now. Good evening, Mr. Caan. Thank you very much indeed for making time for us this evening. In Juliet's report, you talked of the heartbreak, you talked of the desperation you've seen. You've obviously seen firsthand the difficulties in distributing the aid. What do you think should happen as a result of what you've seen?
I think what we need to do, and I think it needs to be done immediately, is I think the country needs an additional £500 million to deal with the immediate effects right now. What I didn't realise when I left here is actually that 20 million people had been affected. Something like 39 million acres, you know, were actually underground. I didn't realise that 3.5 million children were now subjected to waterborne diseases. The Pakistan economy was projected to grow at 4.5% this year. It's now projected to grow at 0. Its major export, which is cotton, has been wiped out as an industry. This country does not have the means to deal with the devastation of this sheer scale. The thing that I did learn is that aid was getting through, but what was apparent is not enough aid. The amount of aid that's getting through is literally for hundreds of thousands, but we have 20 million people there, and therefore unless the aid does get through, there is no question people will die. The look on people's faces that I saw of anguish, frustration, desperation. This is the holy month of Ramadan, where they don't eat all day, but to go 2-3 days in 45 degrees of heat is literally unbearable, and they were absolutely desperate. And I urge the international community, I urge the people in Britain that forget politics, forget geopolitics here. This is about humanity. These people need our help, but most importantly, they need it now.
All right, James Caan, thank you very much indeed for joining us.